Someone cut you?
Yeah,
Why?
the guys that were jumping my brother had my brother surrounded. They had already cut him all up. He's up cut him here and here.
Why
and
were they surrounding him?
Just mean people, crazy folks all over. So anyway, between the both of us, there was and ironically, it was right in front of the Selective Service office where you're supposed to report. And there was a big old piece of one of those things right at the water drains like that. It was hanging loose.
Yeah?
When he cut me, all I could see was the blood gushing out of there, and I said, "Oh man!" And they were still had my brother, so I grabbed that pipe like that, and I started whacking him with a pipe, and I got him off of him. And I hit one guy pretty good and put him in a coma, knocked him out. Anyway, my brother went to his girlfriend's house, and her mom had just had a young child or a young baby about a year before that. She had a bunch of diapers, like old cotton diapers, wrapped him up in diapers and duct tape. And that's how he went to Nam.
You didn't go to a hospital?
No, he shipped out right away. Just, it was like, get out of Dodge real quick. So he left. He had to leave the next morning. Then it was in hours. And I went to the town further down the road, so that I didn't have to have it locally, kind of in the place I live, and had a stitch. And they asked me about it, and I said I was in a bar, and these guys came out and tried to rob me and cut my arm, and they stitched it up. But the time I got home, my wife said the sheriff was here, and I said, uh-oh. And I had just bought a little Volkswagen bus, a '63 Volkswagen bus. And I said, man, I said, if I report, I said, they're gonna send me to jail. That's not gonna be good. She packed me a bag. So she packed me a bag, I packed me some clothes in there. And she said, where are you going? I said, I'll let you know as soon as I get there.
Did you have your own children by then?
Yeah, we had a son, and he had just been born, about a year old. So my sisters were still there. They're still at home. They hadn't gone off yet. So anyway, I got in the car and I left. I got to California. Well, I actually got to Washington first. I went to Washington, stayed in Washington about a week. There's some guys up there, and there was nothing happening up there. So when I came down here, and I went to San Francisco. I stayed in San Francisco for about 2 weeks. Got a job over there. It was a part-time thing, doing some stuff. And then I had already learned a trade in Colorado. I learned the flooring trade, how to lay floors, carpet, linoleum, tile, and all that other stuff. And I was working at the furniture place. I knew all that, so I already had a trade, some skills anyway. And so I got out here and I buffaloed my way into the trade unions. I changed my name. I just used my middle name instead of my full name. I dropped my middle name and I just Eloy Martinez instead of my other name, which I gave to my brother because they had named him, when they baptized him, they had gave him my name too. And I told him they liked Arthur so much, they had to get 2 Arthurs in the family, So he had always run by his other name. And he always wanted to run by Arthur. So I told him, you can have Arthur now. So now he's Arthur and I'm not, So anyway, he ended up with the name. I came out here, and I still had a lot of anger. I really got angry. Then I was starting to revert back to the way I was before. And I was thinking, oh man, get off work and I go to a bar and I just sit there in the anger. People be looking at me. I said, what you looking at, man? Kind of like that kind of attitude. And I said, no, you gotta quit that, dude. You gotta quit that. So I gone to the co-op up in Berkeley, and I met this guy outside. He told me, he said, you're giving stamps, and then when you buy your groceries, it had black and brown stamps that you'd save in these little envelopes, and you could trade for groceries after you got these little envelopes, little booklets. And then you had
these food stamps?
Yeah, they're kind of like, they weren't food stamps. They were just stamps that you got when you bought your groceries. You got like 100 stamps.
Oh,
and
I see.
And once you filled up the book, they were worth $5 or $6 for the book. But it was basically food stamps. Right?
Okay.
Anyway, so he said, can I get your stamps from you? And I said, sure. And I said, what are you doing with them? And he says, I'm working with Cesar Chavez. I said, the farm workers? And he says, yeah. He says, I said, we work with the farm workers in Colorado. And he said, really?
Can you explain who Cesar Chavez is?
Cesar Chavez is the leader of the National United Farm Worker Union.
In the 60s?
Yeah, he started that union. And him and Dolores Huerta, you know Dolores Huerta?
Sorry?
You don't know about Dolores Huerta?
Can you just tell us?
Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez started the United Farm Worker Union, and they hooked up with the Filipinos, and they had the grape strike. In 1965, 66, they started the grape strike, and they boycotted grapes everywhere.
In the United States?
In the United States, everywhere, and then they got the longshoremen to boycott everything that got shipped out. Then I can't remember which president it was. It was kind of one of them. He was a Republican, I know that. He started buying up all the grapes to ship to the guys overseas, and then we all went to the longshoremen union. All of us went to the longshoremen union and talked to them, and got them to say we're not shipping no grapes, and the grapes were rotting on the dock. They couldn't sell the grapes, so there was no way for them to get them out. So they had to settle. They signed a contract with the farm workers. And the farm workers were making probably 30 cents an hour or something like that. Subsistent. It wasn't even subsistent wages, and they got it up to about $1.
This was in the 60s. Were the farm workers also still from South and Central America? And
most of them were. A lot of the ones that started were from here, but a lot of them came from Mexico. They came here they had what they called the Bracero program, and they would bring all these guys, and they would pay so much money into the Bracero program, and then they would ship back to Mexico. So a lot of the people that were in that Bracero program, when they got shipped back to Mexico, never got their money from here. So when the farmers,
someone else made the money.
So they took it. The government took it. So when the farm workers, when Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta started the farm worker union, the Filipino union joined with them. That's why they became the United Farm Workers.
The Filipino Union in the U.S.?
Yes.
So there were a lot of Filipino workers?
They were called the Agricultural Workers of America.
So your agriculture workers here in California were Filipinos and Central Americans, and who else?
Mostly Filipinos.
Mostly Filipinos in the 60s?
Yeah, mostly Filipinos. Because a lot of the Filipinos came here to work in the railroads and stuff, and they weren't allowed to bring their wives over here.
Oh.
So they didn't have, for a long time they weren't.
I thought it was Chinese people working the railroads.
Both.
And Filipinos.
Mexicans, Indians, it was all. It was
Native Americans too.
Yeah, it was.
So the farm workers were not mostly European Americans.
No.
They were from other places.
Most of the farm workers, the union started here. This is where
This is where the farmers' union started.
This is where the farm workers started their union. This is the first union. That was the first union they ever had amongst farm workers. But anyway, they were nonviolent.
Okay.
So that was the reason that I went with them.
So you joined their movement?
Yeah, I joined them. They were paying $5 a week.
For what?
That was it. That's all you made, $5 a week.
For the farm workers?
Yeah, working for the farm workers. And all the rest you had to hustle for yourself. So that was, to teach you how to do stuff, So they ship people from here to Boston, all over the United States. People went all over, and they got $5 a week assistant. And they had start their own programs and start their own, but they organized everywhere, all over, So now the union's pretty good size. In fact, one of the daughters was
one of the daughters of Cesar Chavez?
His granddaughter.
Uh-huh.
That's one of his daughters. His daughter, Julie Rodriguez. He was Pamela. What's her name? The one that just lost the big race, Harris.
Oh.
She was her secretary when she was a district attorney here, and then she ended up in Joe Biden's administration.
Yeah.
As she organized all the groups. I don't know what she did.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, he's got a National Day of Recognition in California. March 31st is his birthday every year.
Yes.